Hey everybody, it's Master Gallengeist here, bringing you my review for Stranger Things Season 3 on Netflix. And I really enjoyed this season. It just did a really good job of keeping good pacing going throughout the whole season. A little bit kind of stranger at the end, but that pretty much at the end of the final episode. But other than that, everything moved along very well, and it didn't really seem to be a lot of filler. And another thing that I really liked about this season is that the main kind of inspiration that you see, granted, is there's other ones as well, but the main one is like John Carpenter's The Thing. And just seeing all that stuff go out was pretty kind of cool. So we get into it and we see that pretty much Mike and Eleven are doing their thing as a couple, and Lucas and Max are doing their thing as a couple. Will's kind of been a fifth wheel, and Dustin had been off to a science camp. So he kind of comes back, and he thinks that everybody had kind of forgotten about him, but it was kind of cool to see him come back in and get reacquainted with the group and all that. We kind of see everybody doing their own thing. Hopper's kind of pissed off with what's going on with Eleven and Mike, but doesn't know how to talk to them about it because they're pretty much spending every waking minute with each other and pretty much making out. So I understand that that's uncomfortable for him, but he never kind of really got to that point with his own daughter because of how young she died. And we see that there's a new mall that's been built up and it has affected the downtown businesses, and Joyce is pretty much just being the only person working at her store and pretty much has nothing to do really all day. It's kind of interesting how the more things change, the more they stay the same, whereas the mall is kind of taken over, like, interestingly enough, kind of like e-commerce and killing kind of like small businesses and everything. Now we got to this point where e-commerce is killing the malls and all that. It's like, okay, that's kind of interesting to see that kind of parallel. But there's other forces going on with these malls and everything. And another kind of focus we get is Red Dawn because there's a Soviet presence. We had seen in the beginning of the season that the Soviets were trying to do stuff with the Upside Down as well, but it resulted in their machine blowing the fuck up and killing a lot of people and giving this one dude a year to do what he needed to do. So that brought us to the time frame of 1985 in the present and pretty much around the 4th of July. So all of our group dynamics are getting together. We see that Dustin has gone off to show his group his girlfriend by using this radio tower that he had pretty much made and was trying to get in contact with her. But of course, Mike and Eleven go off on their own, and the rest of the group kind of disperses because it's getting really late. He's like, damn it, and he's not able to get in contact with Susie. We also see that Nancy and John have internships at this newspaper, and that is pretty good. I mean, it does some kind of conflict with what starts going on later, but there's a lot of cash juggling, so we see that everything is pretty much given about as much time to develop as it can be given. So we start getting in the crux of what's going on. We see that Billy is a lifeguard and was pretty much going to go bang Mike's mom because all the moms thinks he's the hot guy, and of course he's the bad boy. So it's like, okay, and he was going to go up to a motel, but he hits something and is pissed off that his car's damaged, and he gets dragged down into this kind of industrial kind of place by some unknown entity that was awoken when this giant power outage went on. I was like, huh, that's kind of interesting. And we're like, yep, that's the Mind Flayer. And we see this just kind of snowball as strange occurrences start happening. Billy's acting differently. All these rats are acting differently as well, seeing them like explode and everything. You gotta hand it to the special effects. They did a really good job of making this thing ugly as shit and just terrifying. And we see each kind of group kind of come to their own kind of conclusions as to what's going on. We see that Billy is kind of patient zero, the kind of host that the Mind Flayer needed to start expanding his influence, as he takes this one girl that's like a co-lifeguard with him and has her taken into effect. And they start getting all these other people in town. Nancy and John actually got a call from someone and went to look at what was going on, and she was talking about this weird rat eating this fertilizer and everything. They get pictures of it, and of course, the newspaper laughed Nancy off and on it, and like, this is stupid, rabies rat, whatever. And that's funny because the head of the newspaper is the lifeguard's father. That becomes important because of how interconnected everything starts getting. So we see that Billy uses this lifeguard Heather to take over her parents and start building their kind of army. And the rat explodes and takes over the crazy old lady that Nancy and John went to interview. It's like, oh shit. She kind of becomes their kind of link towards the latter part of the season. But as kind of the group dynamics start going a little bit into different ways, we see that Mike and Eleven have a falling out because Hopper, instead of having the heart-to-heart that he talked with Joyce with, pretty much decides to threaten the shit out of him, and pretty much Mike has to lie to Eleven, and this pisses her off. She dumps him and starts all these kind of crazy machinations as we see that Eleven used her powers to spy on Mike and Lucas and Will, and it is brought up, but I kind of wanted somebody to take her to task and be like, that's not cool. You now are able to see people expressing their thoughts and doing things and speaking without their knowledge. What if we were able to do that to you? I kind of wish that was explored a little bit more. But as she is now getting her like girl time with Max, which I thought was cool, so that because she doesn't really have any female friends that she has really gotten into, they start using her powers in that way, and they decide to look in on Billy and find that's how they get kind of drawn into it. You see Will also getting a danger sense of when the Mind Flayer's doing all the kind of stuff. She sees Billy turning Heather into a Mind Flayer possessed person and starts going, that's kind of weird. They start doing their own kind of thing. That's where they come in on the night that Billy and Heather take her parents, and she's like, this isn't good. And it starts kind of snowballing from there as we see that Driscoll, they go to kind of find her again, but find that she has been taken over by the Mind Flayer as well and sent off to the hospital. This cascades to the chain of events that a possessed head of the newspaper fires them both. This sets off a little tip between Nancy and John that gets repaired later, but it's never really put into perspective in that Nancy didn't do smart reporting work. That's the biggest issue, and it cost John his job and her job. It's like, okay. I wish that had been a little bit taken into account as well, because I'm like, listen, yes, I understand questioning authority and trying to find the truth and all that is a big important thing. But Nancy did it stupidly, and she never came to the terms of how stupidly she acted. Yes, she was right that something was going on, as she kept going back and seeing that Driscoll was going nuts. And that kind of dovetails in the fact that they had tried to capture Billy, but it failed horribly. They tried to get him into a sauna and kind of burn out the Mind Flayer, but he was able to get strong enough, bust out, severely injure Eleven and Mike before he's able to escape, and we see how far the influence is spread of the Mind Flayer into a lot of the town. It's like, holy shit, what is this trying to do and accomplish? Because we see him building this kind of giant body and form. It's like, wow, that's not going to be good. So we start getting towards the end, and they're trying to figure out how to capture and figure out where the Mind Flayer is to stop him before he gets too powerful. And their idea is to go to the old lady. And they go into the hospital and find out that she's gone. And they get confronted with two of the people from the newspaper, and John and Nancy have to like fight their way through that, but they're able to defeat them. But the problem is they turn into goopy things and fuse together and turn into this crazy ass looking monster. It's like, holy shit. So 11 beats the unholy hell out of that thing and throws it out of the hospital, but it escapes into the sewers to get back into the Mind Flayer's main form. So they're all freaking out. They know that that's really bad what they need to do. So they go back to Hopper's place while Hopper has to deal with like all this other stuff. So they are able to get into Billy's kind of mind, and that was Eleven's whole kind of thing. And we see her trying to locate him and figure out what's going on, and she uses her powers to get into his head and figure out where exactly the location is. However, the Mind Flayer is able to figure out where her location is through that connection as well, and pretty much says, yeah, I'm making something for you to kill you and then take over the rest of the world kind of spiel. It's like, yep, sounds about right. And she's freaking out. We have also gotten that while that she's using her powers this way, Mike's kind of pissed off at the group and rightfully calls him out thinking, listen, she could be getting brain damage and everything. And everyone's like, oh no, she's all right. I'm like, what do you think these kind of telekinetic powers use? And she gets nosebleeds pretty much every time she uses her powers this way. I mean, I know that Mike is her boyfriend, or was her boyfriend. He's supposed to think of these things, but everybody else should be like, you're really using her powers a lot in a short kind of time frame. I don't know, there could be severe repercussions for that. And he pretty much drops his feelings saying that he loves her, and everybody's like, oh shit. And everybody kind of plays it off when 11 had came into the room. It's like, oh, that's good. Hopefully you bring that up later, which it is. And of course 11's freaking out. We see that the Mind Flayers decided to pretty much absorb everybody else in the town except for Billy and start his campaign to take out what he perceives as the biggest threats. And we see them kind of just like crashing through, and he's trying to take them out at the cabin, but 11 is able to pretty much rip his head apart, but not before getting bit by the Mind Flayer's giant goopiness. They do a good job of being like the Thing and the Blob kind of all in one, kind of really crazy. So they escape from there, and they're trying to figure out what to do. They're bandaging her wounds, but we see that she has also been kind of infected with the Mind Flayer's presence, but yet not to the point that she's taken over, because they go to the mall because that's kind of where everything's going into. We see that Hopper and Joyce have gone through and figured out what's going on, that the mall is a front by the Russians, Red Dawn style, and that they like go through all these abandoned properties, that the mayor has pretty much been in league with them and buying them up and trying to figure out what their whole connection is with what's going on here, while they're getting pretty much tailed by a Russian Terminator kind of dude. He's not a robot, but he takes a lot of shit and comes back, and Hopper gets his ass beat a little bit, and yeah. So they're able to find a Russian scientist, Alexei, and they take him to the kind of crazy conspiracy theorist Murray dude, and they're able to figure out that they need these keys to shut down the big key because they want to get into the other dimensions. Like, you need to have learned what's going on. So they get that all together. They get to the 4th of July celebration, and of course Alexei gets taken out by the Russian Terminator dude, and Hopper and Joyce go to the mall because that's where everything's kind of congregating. Now, at this point, we've also had the other subplot of Dustin and Steve and the girl from the ice cream shop and Luke's sister, Erica, having to deal with what's going on at the mall. They intercepted a Russian communique because of Dustin's tower, and they are able to pinpoint that everything's going on at the mall. They get trapped in the Russian base as they see the giant laser thing that they're calling the key burrowing into the Upside Down. And it's like, you guys haven't learned, man. You guys haven't learned. So as everything's kind of converging, we get Joyce and Hopper have called the government to kind of get back up. Joyce pretty much bringing the hammer down on them. Everybody converges at the mall. 11 is able to deal with the Russians by throwing a car at them and has to take out this part of the Mind Flayer, and that's kind of the end of her powers at the moment, which kind of sucks. She's not able to reflip the car over because they got to get that to get an ignition belt, because Billy is sitting out there and has taken the belt from the vehicle that they had used to get in there, and Billy's kind of keeping them in there. This kind of happens after they had kind of like all grouped up together, And Hopper, Joyce, and Murray were going down into the Russian base to essentially, you can either turn off the machine or blow it up. They decide to blow it up. Smart move to make sure that the gate can close completely. And while Dustin and the rest of his forces were in the base, they were able to ascertain that they've got like giant cages and giant taser sticks. Enough for like cows. I'm like, oh, so they're probably trying to take animals from the upside down, as we will see later. And of course, Steve and his accomplice were drugged up at this point as they had been captured by the Russians as they were trying to ascertain information. As they hid out in the movie theater, and we see that Steve had had an interesting relationship with this girl, but we find out that she's gay and likes girls, and that really doesn't affect their friendship, but it was a nice kind of thing as we see that she's been a little bit standoffish to Steve, kind of like hitting him with jokes and everything, and that's mainly because a girl that she liked Steve instead. So they had went off to help escort Dustin and Erica to the tower to kind of coordinate all kinds of efforts, mainly Dustin trying to give Murray and the rest of them the instructions to go through the Russian underbase. We then see that the Mind Flayer has been able to take his big form and is pretty much attacking everybody in the mall. And as they're trying to escape, of course, that's when the whole ignition belt comes in, but Steve and the rest are able to come in and stop Billy from doing what he's doing to kind of get them. But everybody kind of gets scattered. Mike 11 and Max are in one portion and trying to escape from the Mind Flayer, as the Mind Flayer is pretty much chasing the rest of them. But we see that they were drawn back to the mall because Billy is able to see that they're still there. And of course, Steve and the rest of them decide to turn around and kind of go and help. They had acquired a lot of fireworks, so it's like, okay, let's see this. And as Billy is trying to present 11 to the Mind Flayer, that's when everybody else is kind of converging to help back out. But the thing is, 11 is able to help Billy because she had seen all of his kind of childhood and everything. So it was really cool to get that character development from Billy, even though it doesn't really last that much longer. I mean, we've seen him throughout the season as he has been trying to fight with this influence, and here he wins and stops the Mind Flayer from taking over 11, but he gets severely injured and then punctured through the chest and killed. But see, here's the thing. Even if Billy had fought off the influence completely, all of the hosts of the Mind Flayer drink all these kind of chemicals and everything, so he probably wouldn't have survived without the influence of the Mind Flayer. So this was kind of the last thing he could have done. So we see them getting 11 out of there as they're kind of like using the fireworks and all that to kind of like mess around with it and give enough time for the Russian team to do what they need to do. We had also gotten this funny little thing as Dustin was able to get in contact with Susie because they needed this certain number to get into a safe and get the keys for the machine. But the thing is, as they're trying to turn off the machine, Russian Terminator dude comes in at the last time, and Hopper is able to kick his ass into the machine, but it forces all this electricity coming out, makes a barrier that he can't get through, so Joyce has to switch off the machine herself and, in essence, kill Hopper. And then, of course, the gate closes. But see, the thing is, we don't see Hopper's body or anything. So we get to the end, and we see that Joyce, throughout the season, has been planning on moving away. She takes in 11 since Hopper seems to be dead. There's no body, and this fake out kind of pisses me off at the end, mainly because of how it's handled. Overall, I really enjoyed how everything kind of flowed together and all the storylines converged. But when we get to the end, it's a little bit strange, mainly at the teaser at the end. The core of this has been wrapped up because they needed to turn off the gate to shut off the Mind Flayer's influence. So that's good. He doesn't have a host, but he could potentially come back if the doors open again. And we see that Joyce has taken in 11 and that Joyce, Will, John, and 11 are moving. Everybody has their kind of tearful goodbye and everything. We see 11 is reading this heartfelt letter that Hopper was going to do, but he decided to go the route and confront Mike instead. And that was a nice little thing. But then you get to the end, and it's kind of like, okay, we go back to Russia. We see that they're trying to use the prisoners, and they've got an American. I'm like, oh, okay. So either a couple choices happened. Hopper actually died, which I don't buy. He went into the Upside Down to save himself from the explosion, or the Russians captured him. I don't know how that would have occurred, but we'll have to see. Or this could be a stinger for a new character. So they take this Russian prisoner and pretty much present it to be eaten by a Demogorgon. It's like, okay. I like this, but I kind of want us to get to a conclusion with the Upside Down because there's a lot of different other stories. It's not getting old. They have done kind of refreshing things. First doing a mystery thing and the Demogorgon being a really good antagonist. Then, of course, with them trying to deal with what's going on with the Gate in the second season and the Demodogs and all of that. And then the Mind Flayer coming in and doing his business to take out what he perceives as a threat so that way he could take over control of this dimension. We'll have to see how this next one kind of plays out. They could do it in an interesting way. I've got faith in them because I've enjoyed what they've been doing so far. But I kind of want to see them do something a little bit different. Maybe another dimension or whatnot comes into play, or I don't know. There could be a lot of different things. So I'm excited to see that. I just wish that we didn't get this weird open-endedness with Hopper. If you're going to kill someone, kill him. If you're not going to kill him, don't tease it like this. Don't do a Walking Dead style Glenn thing where you keep faking out his death so much that his actual death doesn't really have that much of an impact. But I overall enjoyed it and kind of all the different kind of characters and the development that we got throughout this season and the crazy effects and all of that. And I can't wait to see where this kind of goes next. So those are my opinions on the season. Tell me what you guys think in the comments below. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, if you agree with me, if you disagree with me. Also like and subscribe, and I hope you have a good day.